Well, springtime is right around the corner, and that means it's time for macro photography. So if you're interested in getting into macro photography, but you really don't want to break the bank doing it, I've got some great tips on how you can get started and do so on a budget. Hey, thanks for joining me. So Riley and I went out this morning to walk the dog and take some macro pictures. And it was actually a little colder than I thought it'd be. Springtime's right around the corner, but it's in the mid-30s this morning. And it's going to get up in the 60s today, so it's going to be nice, but we had a little cold front come through, and I didn't wear a heavy enough jacket for 30-degree weather, 30-ish degree weather, so I didn't stay out very long. But springtime is here, and this is my favorite time of the year to shoot macro photography. Obviously everything is starting to bud out. The flowers are soon to be here. Things are greening up. It's just my favorite time. And while I'm not really big into bug photography, I do it a little every now and then if something just strikes me. I really just love shooting flowers and plants and things like that in the springtime. And I love the fall too. It's got its special place. The wintertime, I don't do a whole lot of macro because it's, well, just kind of brown here in Oklahoma. Anyway, so I wanted to talk this morning about how you can get started in macro photography without breaking the bank. This kind of presumes you've already got a digital camera of some kind, either a DSLR or a mirrorless. I think the mirrorless gives you some more options, but you can do it with either one. So the first thing we want to talk about are the lenses that you need. You need a macro lens setup of some kind. And obviously the first way you can go is just to buy an actual macro lens. On the Olympus cameras, the least expensive one you can buy is the Olympus 30mm f3.5 macro. Now, it's a great lens, very sharp, not terribly expensive. Right now, I think they're hitting right around $200. I think I saw them on Amazon for $199. So, it's a relatively affordable lens, but you don't have to pay for or buy an actual macro, autofocus modern lens to do macro. There's a lot of other options, and we want to talk about some of those because you can certainly do macro for a lot less money. Now, the next option you might want to consider would be to use a vintage lens. So here I have a 55mm f3.5 micro Nikkor. This is a vintage lens. It's 50mm in focal length. I've got an extension tube. Nikon sells this PK13 extension tube, and with this extension tube, this lens will give you full 1-to-1 magnification. That means that the image on your sensor is exactly the same size as the subject you're taking a picture of. Now, this has pretty decent working distance, and without the extension tube, you get 2-to-1 magnification, which is enough for most things. And I really love these lenses. These micro Nikkors are just incredibly sharp. There's some other good macro lenses from Pentax, Olympus, Canon, Minolta. They all made good macro lenses. And the thing is, I don't think anyone really makes a bad macro lens because a macro lens is supposed to be nice and sharp. And so, by and large, no major manufacturer makes a macro lens that's not reasonably sharp. Some are better than others, and the micro Nikkor, I think, is known for being exceptional. But my favorite way to do macro, and not just because of the budget, but because of the results, is to use a zoom lens like my 40-to-150. This is the inexpensive 40-to-150 f4 to f5.6R. I think these things, I know used you can get them for $100 or less, and new they're probably around $150 or so. And a lot of times they're included with a kit when you buy a camera. They're referred to as one of the kit lenses. And what I use with this is this Raynox DCR 250. Now, the Raynox DCR 250 is a supplementary lens. And by that, I mean it is a lens that you can attach to the front of your zoom lens, and it magnifies the image and turns it into a macro lens. So it comes with a little adapter that has got 2 springs in it, and you can see how these move in and out. And so it'll adapt to a wide variety of lens sizes, and the Raynox unit screws into the front of it, and it works. It's not super stable, and it's not terribly hard to knock it off if you're not careful. So what most people that really are using the Raynox do is they get some step-up rings now, or step-down rings. Now you can buy these. I'll put a link in the description for these as well. This is part of a set, and actually the smaller ones aren't with me, but you buy this set of step-down rings, and I think they're in the $20-ish range for the set. And these are from K&F Concepts, and the rings I need to make this work for me on this Raynox are a 43 to 52 millimeter step down ring, or down ring, and then a 52 to 55, and then a 55 to 58. And that allows me to screw this 43 millimeter Raynox onto the 58 millimeter threads on the front of my zoom lens. Now, the thing that's cool about this is you got nice long working distance. You've got a zoom lens, so you can zoom and get greater or lesser magnification. This zoom lens is known to not be at its sharpest all the way out at 150. So I tend, with shooting macro, to stop at about 100 millimeter. That gives me plenty of magnification, and I've got some good working distance, and it just does a fantastic job. There's all kinds of like Facebook groups and stuff about macro, and there's some that deal specifically with the Raynox. It's very popular for this. Some people put the Raynox DCR 250 on the front of like the 60 millimeter f2.8 macro from Olympus. And it increases the magnification on that. You could put this on a regular 50 millimeter lens if you're shooting micro 4/3, because that's, that's definitely going to work on that. It's really versatile. It works best, as I understand it, on a zoom lens that, like on the Olympus or on the micro 4/3, this 40 to 150 is kind of the ideal range. If you were shooting full frame, it'd be something like an 80 to 200 or 80 to 300 millimeter zoom lens. It's what you'd want to adapt it to. And it just does an amazing job. The images it produces are good and sharp. They've got obviously good color. The thing I like about this, though, that's so versatile, is that the autofocus still works on your camera, kind of. So the way this works is, let's say I zoom it to a certain focal length, whatever that is, and I move the camera in and out from my subject till it looks pretty close to sharp in the viewfinder. Then I touch my exposure button lightly to autofocus it, and the autofocus will fine tune. Now, sometimes you kind of maybe have to move in or out a little bit depending on where you're at with your subject. You want to be pretty close to being in focus. Then when you touch that release button, it'll just fine tune the focus for you, and you can take a picture. So it makes it real easy to get the focus close, lock it in, and take a picture. And no, this will not focus to infinity once you put this on here. You put this on here and it'll only focus at close distances, and the focus range is pretty short. So you've got to move the camera back and forth till you're pretty close to being right on in focus. Then when you touch the button, though, it'll, excuse me, it'll lock in and take a picture. So this is one of my favorites. It does a fantastic job. The images are just beautiful. I took a couple this morning with it. It is really just an amazing setup, and it's not expensive. So the Raynox DCR 250, when I bought mine, they were about $65. I've had it for a few years. I looked on Amazon this morning. They're $71.99, which is still not too bad. And you can use this, like I say, on a variety of lenses. You don't have to just use it on the one zoom lens here. I could put it on front of this 55 micro Nikkor if I wanted more magnification. I could put it on just a plain 50 millimeter lens, or maybe a 135 or some vintage lens. It could just, one of them that I like using it on is my 105 f2.5 Nikkor, just the prime Nikkor lens that I've adapted to this. Put the Raynox on there, it does a fantastic job. Now, with a vintage lens, obviously you've got to completely manual focus it. You're just moving the thing back and forth to get it in focus, or using the focus barrel on the lens. But it really works nicely on an autofocus zoom like this. And like I say, it won't autofocus from infinity out, up to close. You've got to get the thing adjusted pretty close to being in focus, and then when you touch the release button, it'll fine tune it for you. Once you've done it a couple times, it's really easy. Might take a little bit of practice, but it works pretty easy. So that's the lens. Next, we're going to talk about the lighting. Now, I shoot a lot of my macro pictures with available light. Do that all the time. It works great in a lot of cases, but sometimes you need to fill in some shadows, or you want to, maybe it's not that bright outside and you want to just brighten up the subject, or maybe you want your subject to be nice and bright but drop your backgrounds out dark. One of the simplest things you can do is a flashlight, like one of these. And I like this as opposed to just one with a round, like regular light. And you can use the flashlight on your cell phone, but that's a very pinpoint, spot of light. And I like something like this because this is going to be at least broader than your typical subject that you're photographing, or at least as broad as. So these are nice and bright, as you can see. And this actually has a magnet in it. You can stick it on something metal, but these are handy enough that I can actually hold my camera and either looking at the screen or looking at the viewfinder and just hold this out over my subject and light it while I take a picture. And I can move the light around to get different effects, and it works quite handy. These are not expensive. I bought this one at actually a woodworking store, but you can get them at the hardware store or sporting goods stores. This one is 170 lumen. I'll see if I can find a good one on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. But a small flashlight like this is really handy. I can stick it in my pocket, and it can be with me when I'm shooting macro, and I like it a lot. Pretty much daylight color balance, and it works great. The next thing, of course, is using a flash and a diffuser. Now, the diffuser is one I've made. Now, this plastic material, place I was working had this plastic on top of some wire shelves. They were lining the shelves with it so small parts wouldn't fall through the shelves. And when they got rid of the shelves, they were throwing a whole bunch of this plastic away. So I saved it because it's perfect for this. And as you can see, it diffuses light nicely. It makes a nice diffuse light. And so what I did is I cut this circle here and then brought it out to the opening. This is about 60 millimeters. Now that's just kind of what worked for me. If you have a bigger lens, you might need a bigger circle. But on this Raynox, one of the things I love about the Raynox too is it has this step right here. So it's got this rim on the front, and there's the back end of it here gives you this step, and that works perfectly for putting this diffuser in. So I put Velcro, it's just sticky Velcro on the ends of it down here, and I can put it on the lens and then put a flash on my camera, and it will diffuse the light. So the flash I generally use, I know this is silly, is literally the flash that came with my EM5 Mark II. And it's this little bitty thing. And it's not that powerful, but it's sufficient to do what I need to do in most cases. Now, the downside to this flash is it actually uses your camera's batteries to power it. So use it a lot. It is going to bring your camera batteries down a little bit faster. I probably should buy a bigger flash that throws more light out. I probably would benefit from that. But to be honest, I shoot more available light than I do this kind of thing. So I just haven't spent the money on it. But what this does then is the flash lights the back of your diffuser, then which acts like a big softbox over your subject. And it allows you to create those images where, like, if you're shooting a flower, the flower is nicely illuminated, but the background can drop off to black. And the way you do that is the sync speed on the Olympus camera that I have, the EM5 Mark II and my EP5, will sync at a 250th of a second. So if I set if I'm in, especially like it's early morning or evening when it's not that bright out, if I set a really low ISO and I run my shutter speed up to a 250th and I use a relatively small aperture, I can, if I'm using like f8 or something like that, I can basically correctly expose the flower and grossly underexpose the background, so you have this nicely illuminated flower in a black background. And you see this in some of the sample images I'm putting up. It's really easy to do. Once you kind of figure out, your settings, it's really simple. I set my camera to either manual on the flash adjustment on it, the flash setting, or I'll set it to fill flash. Both those settings, the flash fires every time, no matter what. But on manual, you can actually use your controls on the back of the camera to adjust the intensity of the flash. So it's a little bit more versatile than just setting it to fill flash, where it tries to automatically expose the flash There's the flash tries to adjust automatically. Anyway, this is my diffuser. It cost me virtually nothing to make. If you're wanting to find some material to make one of these from, I've seen some like report covers that are kind of good heavy plastic that are frosted like this. Maybe not quite as frosty as this. Maybe, you know, a little bit more translucent, but you need some plastic that's, you know, flexible, but you don't want something too floppy. And you get some sticky Velcro. Now, I know I have black and white on here. That's just because those are some scraps I had laying around. And I probably should have gotten either all white or all black. But anyway. Anyway, you just wrap it around the lens, Velcro it to itself, and you can use the Velcro to adjust the size of the hole. And it'll work on just really any of my lenses. It even works on the 30mm macro because there's a step back here. I have to go a little further back. If I put a lens hood on this, then I can go to the very front if the lens hood sticks up enough. And same kind of thing here. I have to go back, you know, in this part of the lens to grab it. Unless I put a lens hood on here, it'll just slide off the front. But one of the reasons I love the Raynox, it's like it's made for this, because this groove right here, it just fits perfectly. So anyway, you can make one of these. This one is, like I say, about a 60mm hole. This thing's what, about 10 inches long and 7 inches wide, maybe, something like that. The size isn't really critical. I could have made it a little bit bigger or a tiny bit smaller. It wouldn't have mattered. As long as it's, you know, significantly bigger than your subject, it's going to act like a softbox and wrap light around it. So anyway, that's what I do for lighting. Couple things to think about too. You know, you don't have to spend a lot of money to do macro. You can do something like this Raynox, fix yourself up some lighting, use whatever little flash you have. You can shoot available, you know, light. You can use a flashlight for fill light. You don't have to spend a lot of money to do this and have a lot of fun with it. A couple of things I want you to think about too. Don't forget that when you're using different macro lenses, they have a different working distance. So the 30mm macro, when you're focused up close, it has a really short working distance, which makes it a little hard to get light onto your subject if the lens is kind of blocking. So this is good for some things. I like it for a lot of uses, but for some uses, if I need to photograph something really small and get really close, it kind of blocks your light sometimes. So that's kind of a challenge. I really love the vintage lens too, the 50mm, 55mm micro Nikkor. I've shot a lot of macro pictures with this. Really love it. It gives me great results. You do have to set your aperture, of course, manually, and you have to focus manually. That's really not a problem. Usually I'll focus the thing to, you know, as far out as I want it to be, and then move the camera back and forth to fine tune my focus. This setup, however, is my favorite because I already had the zoom lens. The Raynox is really inexpensive, and I can fix myself up with either like the diffuser and a flash or available light or however I want to light it. But think about your working distance as you choose a lens. If you're shooting insects, you want to have some good working distance so you don't spook the bug away. You get too close, the bug's going to fly away or jump off or disappear or whatever. It's a spider, it might jump on your camera, which would be exciting. So remember, working distance is always good to have for some subjects. The other thing is, especially when taking pictures of flowers, don't forget to think about black and white macro pictures of flowers. I've done just a couple of these and they were really intriguing. When you take all the color out of the flower, then the structure of the flower becomes more, you know, a greater part of the image. And some of the macro pictures I've taken of flowers were really striking. So I would suggest that you give that a try. Shoot some high contrast black and white pictures of your flowers and see what some of those look like. I think you'll find some of that's pretty amazing. Anyway, I hope some of this is helpful for you. And if you're interested in getting into macro, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I'm always happy to help. It's one of my favorite subjects to shoot is macro, and this is the time of year to do it. So if you're wanting to get started, it's really not hard, and you can experiment with a lot of different things. And especially with the digital camera these days, you don't have to wait for film to come back to see how things worked out. You can shoot and adjust and look at your results on the fly, and it makes it so much fun. Anyway, if you have any thoughts or questions, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I always love hearing from you. And as always, thanks for watching.